Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. The irony of this episode is I'm going to be doing an episode on California in one of the coldest days of the year, which is so un-California. Let me see here. Yeah, it's 42 degrees outside. We've done colder. We've done 38 before. Let's see if we can hit it tonight. So this episode is for people who live in California who are looking around going, what the hell's going on? But mainly for people going, what the hell's up with California? With that place over there? Because let's face it, the world is completely inundated, no matter where you are, with stories about Los Angeles, stories about California, maybe the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, I don't know. And you're probably, on one level, tired of hearing about it. I think it's calmed down a little bit because Hollywood is no longer necessary. It is still there. It is still a central point of where a lot of people live who are in that industry, but Hollywood's only a tiny piece of this big-ass puzzle. But I have a journey that, for those of you who've listened to every single episode, you could probably guess a lot of things I'm going to say, but because I have said them in little pieces and parts. But I watched a video on YouTube today at my cigar lounge, and it was about a guy just covering the fact that people are leaving this state in droves. And there was this funny joke when I came. I don't know how funny it was, but it was a joke when I came to California, and it took me about a year to hear it. And somebody said, welcome to California, now go home. Get out of here, And I was like, ooh, that's weird. It took me a while to understand that, and it was people flocking here with perhaps not much to offer the state, too many people here in general, traffic's getting worse and worse, could be a million things. So your humble narrator has an interesting perspective because I wasn't raised here. And it's really, really interesting talking to my friends who were born here, because honestly, what's really strange about it is they don't get how the state was perceived from outside the state. They definitely know how it was destroyed, or they've seen it get destroyed. But that allure of California, they don't get it. Why would they? They were raised here, So I was on the outside for 17 years. I had visited once as a kid and visited once as a teenager just before moving here. And it depends on where you're coming from as to whether or not you give a crap about California, especially as an American. For those of you who live in foreign countries, I'd be very fascinated to hear your sort of lifelong perspective and sort of your age bracket, because I think if you're younger, California probably didn't mean it that much to you. If you're older, you know about this focal point of California, Hollywood, music industry, whatever. It's a big ass state, so it doesn't have one look. One area has a look, another area has a different look. I mean, we've got Southern California beaches, beautiful palm trees, and that community that's, jogging all the time and eating healthy. And then you move up one notch and you've got sort of your valley. Then you move up another notch and you've got forest, just like Black Forest or something. And then you go up another notch and you get into the Silicon Valley area, which is, I don't know how to describe it. No palms, very foresty, hilly. San Francisco's built, in some crazy, they didn't figure out how to do what Machu Picchu did, which is, hey, maybe we should smooth off these mountains before we build houses on 40-degree angles, Nope. I mean, the balls of people to build on those mountainsides, it's just weird, But anyway, you go north of that and you get sort of in these, back to sort of we get the wine district. It's very spread out and pretty and culturally. And then you go up another notch and you're heading into Oregon. It's very flat, a lot of agriculture up there. And then you're done. If you go inland, you got desert at different levels. You go inland at further north, you get Yosemite. So it's a big ass state and it has a lot of looks. It's almost like its own little country, When I was a kid, I really didn't have any vision of California besides Southern California, besides Los Angeles, and maybe Malibu, which was in a lot of movies, Zuma Beach, which was in, tons of stuff like Planet of the Apes and what have you. So people used to ask me when I first got here at 17, just a couple weeks before I was 18, what brought you to California? Why are you here? And, there were sort of opportunity reasons, of course. I was a software engineer at 18 and I was an artist. And so I thought, it was really the computer side of things that was going to allure me. But I have to say, I was not aware that where I was going to support my profession. I just just felt this yearning to go in that direction, you know. A lot of my family from the early 1900s migrated west. And so I got here and it worked out really fast, right? And this journey is not going to be necessarily about anything I've done here, so that I will try not to repeat. But I want to tell you what I saw and the degradation of this state as it happened. Because when I got here in 1987, okay, you're talking about a state that was exactly like you saw it in the 80s movies. And I can't stress that enough. I mean, you're talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's how the malls were. It's how the people were. Everybody was cool and relaxed and chill. And you had all those 80s clothing that was, you know, in those movies that you see from the 80s, you know, the Malibu, you know, beach homes that were all kind of 80s out with even stuff going back to like terrazzo 50s, early 60s sort of shark skin suits or whatever it was, right? Silk suits, you know. People were nice. Even in the tougher areas, you still had the arguments that were going on were that people were looking at the cops going, why are you being such jerks? Like, this is not the way it's supposed to work. Now, today they expect it. We're 3 decades into expecting to be brutalized depending on what color you are, what kind of car you're driving. So it's a different world, right? But I get 3 supercharged years here. When I get here, it's like all the 80s music is still blasting, all the glam rock. You get sort of all the classic hip-hop stuff's playing on the radio. A lot of the British rock is playing. K-Rock 106.7 is the #1 station in Los Angeles. I mean, when you buy a car, you put it there and it just stays there, you know. You go into Los Angeles at the time, and it's just the bubbling Los Angeles. I mean, it is Rodeo Drive, which I never had enough money to really do much. In fact, you know, somebody bought a pair of shoes and didn't like them, and they fit me, and they gave them to me, and it was like some horrendously expensive pair of leather shoes. So I never bought anything myself there. But you could walk down. These art galleries were just phenomenal. You got art galleries with like art from Russia and all these like middle-aged tapestries and stuff. But I mean, and all this crazy, wild, like, what do you call the metal when they heat it up and cool it down? You know, all this crazy, I just used this in 3D and I can't remember the hell the name of it. I think it starts with a G. But lots of just sculptures and just everything 80s. When I got here, it was just incredible. You didn't worry about your car necessarily getting stolen and stuff if you're just in a normal area. You know, and dreams were like very tangible. The wild thing when I got here in 87 was like people would ask you what you want to do. It did not matter what you said. You could say, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. Okay, great. I got 3 or 4 friends that do that. I'll hook you up. You need to go down and see them, and after the show, you can talk to them, or before the show, or whatever. They'll get you some mic time, and you'll be good. If you said you wanted to be in a band, they're like, get the Recycler, which is like the old paper Craigslist back in the day. Man, just find yourself an audition. You know, if you're a singer, find the singer areas, and da-da-da-da. No big deal. Everything was supported. What I told the people at my church that I wanted to write movies, they were like, oh, yeah, we got 2 people here. They wrote a big part of Edward Scissorhands, and they're doing 10 other things right now, working on Indiana Jones or whatever, you know. We'll hook you up. At my company, 2 or 3 people were like regulars on, was it General Hospital? Was that what it was? The hospital soap opera back in the day. And they just go act, be on TV, and then we'd all sit in the break room watching them on TV. It was like, there they are eating a sandwich next to us. It's not enough money to live off of, but he's just pining to get it. He's on national television. Maybe it's international television. Hell if I know. You go to the beach at night with your friends. Jesus, I mean, I was like 18. I think most of the kids were like 16 to 18. We go to the beach in Malibu. From Camarillo, we drive over. We didn't bring any driftwood or anything. I don't even know how we lit a fire. But someone brought at least something to light it with. And we would just find driftwood on the beach, build a little pile. There's no burners or anything. You just build it and you light it and you chill out, and maybe someone bought a hot dog or a clothesline or whatever, a hanger. We start, you know, cutting them up and stuff and cooking food and having a good time. And no one's out there rolling us, you know. The thing I want to make this episode for is, one, to inform you sort of where California has gone and where it is today, but where it was for sure. But to stress that we have been sold that good eras of history are just disposable razor blades. Like, it's okay. Hey, it's totally okay that Germany was great, now it sucks. It's totally okay that UK was great, but now it sucks. It's totally good that everything was great, but now it sucks. And of course, every area of the world has gone through its bad times that are probably worse than what we're dealing with right now. But we made it better. Europe was in World War I, World War II, and then it got better. It got really, really insane where everybody wants to shoot a movie over there. The movies make people want to do tourism over there. And then all of a sudden, I'm telling you right now, the richest people I know, they don't want to go to Europe. They don't want to go there at all. They could just fly over there, eat lunch, and come back, man. They got their own G5s, and they just, no fucking way, man. No way. They're going back under. They're going back into Nazi rule, and Austria's going fucking first. I mean, how crazy is that shit, right? How ironic. No one wants to go to Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it's like these places are done. Until all this shit burns off, which it doesn't look like it's going to, because we have literally said eras of greatness have to be deprecated. The younger kids, and there's this weird anomaly I'm going to talk about in this episode. I don't know what it is. When you're raised with everything, you want to be in a bad situation. You believe that if you don't have negativity, you can't write a song. If you don't have negativity, you don't have a really good, reason to live or something, man. And I'm going to repeat a story I've only said a couple times. Nothing super special, but it illustrates this point. I think I had this conversation recently, but I may have put an episode recently, so I apologize if this is an early repeat. I'm standing with two of my friends. One of my buddies grew up and had to quit high school at 16 because his mother was a super duper drug addict, may have been doing other things for money. And he had to support himself, his mother, and his sister because no one was bringing in any money. So he has to quit high school. Brilliant dude. Brilliant guy. So he's one of the guys in the room. And we're all way past this stage, right? Then there's my story, which isn't horrible or anything. I just got moved around a lot and had to stick up for myself here and there. Nothing. I had pretty much a standard divorced childhood, right? But this other kid staying in the room had been very lucky to have his parents together, happily married, two sisters, one older, one younger. Just everyone balanced, everything good. His father was a millionaire, self-made, used to climb poles, used to install telephones, and became one of the number one salesmen for the phone company. Ends up selling this huge package to the state of California, and he could retire off that. Got into ATMs when they were huge, got into everything at the right time. So without trying, the first two, like me and this other guy, we were just talking about how nice it is that life is better now because we were in Silicon Valley at the time. We were making games. All three of us work for video game companies, and we're all like, man, it's so much better than growing up. And we just kind of did one of those old-fashioned conversations, but we're in our 20s. We're like 25, 26, somewhere in there. I think I was the oldest one by a year or two. And then our friend that had a good life, he goes, man, I wish I had had a story like that. And we're looking at him like, what does that mean? What does that mean? We'd love to have your story, man. And he said, well, I just had everything, everything was great. Everything was easy and wonderful. And I still live in the same house I grew up in. And it's, when we're looking at each other, my other buddy and myself were looking at each other going, what, are you kidding me? But it looks like whatever was in my friend's head has turned into a viral disease, and it's spreading all over the world. The youth of the world, even if they're not challenged, which most of them are, they want this dark story. And you're sitting there going, what the hell are you talking about? Why would you want that? Some of you might remember Beetlejuice, the movie, with Winona Ryder's, I think, one of her first opening mega roles. I think the very first scene of her in the movie is that she's upstairs dressed in goth, and she's writing a letter, like a suicide letter or something, and she goes, I am so alone. And then she stops. And she starts over again. She says, I am so utterly alone. Well, it's obviously a rich kid living in an amazing house in the middle of this beautiful town. Now, obviously, she's probably moved away from her friends, but dressed in goth. We don't know how many friends she might have had. Don't know. So I'm enjoying myself here. I'm appreciating what's here. I'm appreciating it. I'm noticing. I'm seeing it. I'm hanging out with my boss and all of our employees and just making friends left and right. It's just the way this state was hooked up, especially in Southern California region, which I was all the way up in Ventura County when I started, which for those of you who are not familiar with California is about 50 miles north of LA. Still very Southern California-ish, right? Still got all the palm trees and everything and a nice, beautiful Ventura Beach. So then there's this moment in time where It's not serendipitous. It is completely strategic. And we all know about this, and I've lamented about this intensely. We're just going to speed through it a little bit here because we're really concerned about the upper concepts of how this is happening so we can stop it or educate it or both. But the year flips from 89 to 90. And somewhere in the world, a start gun fired because an agenda was absolutely unleashed on, I think, the entire planet. From a California standpoint, where we're supposed to be setting the trends, stuff happens faster here because we get the debut of everything that's going on in the world, right? We get the first bands that do things. Now, technically speaking, the 90s was really about Oregon and Seattle being picked as the big attraction for music, right? We had a few things come out, a few interesting things. Now, if you wanted to change the world, and you were sitting at that table I always talk about, and you're participating in the change of the world, what is the world? At its fundamental definition, it's a bunch of demographics cut together like Baltic states, or Balkan states, right? Balkanizing the world into demographics. And of course, they're all over the place, right? Even in one city, you've got groups of these type of people, groups of those type of people. It's maybe a racial group first, and then perhaps a religious group on top of that, then a cultural group on top of that. I mean, it's just this infinite layer of chess being played at the same time. Now, what I think was going on was that you have influence pockets of the world, right? So you've got television that's going to influence one way, music's going to go another way, movies are going to go another way. And then fashion had built up really huge, for the last 5 decades or so. About 1950, you have people wearing the same clothes in the United States for probably the last 30 years. From 1930 to probably the beginning of the 60s, for the older people, it's just a suit, a tie, a hat. The women wear dresses. You're done. Of course, in the 60s, we have this huge explosion with drugs and LSD, and we learned how to become more artistic. Without that era, you wouldn't get all the movies of the 80s, 75 to 85, the best 10 years of Hollywood filmmaking. So they managed to take a negative, make it a positive, if there is a negative in that, which I debate sometimes. So they have to lay down this platform of influence that's going to hit every demographic that could possibly come out. They have to have things happen to make sure that what was not acceptable before is acceptable. They have to make you see things that you've never seen before. A new generation to see new Pearl Harbors. That was important. Think about it. In 1941, you get the United States of America, just I can only speak for my country, they get to see Pearl Harbor. At the end of the war, they get shown the videos of the atomic bombs being dropped on Japan. All the way through the 50s, while the Korean War is going, they get to see tons of tests of explosions, right? Then there's a kind of a dual weird thing. You get Vietnam, where you're starting to see your kids disappear into this war that doesn't really have a name at the time, and you're not sure where the hell you're going. You've never been to a tropical jungle before. And then a bunch of kids don't come back. The people that come back are all messed up in the head and they're being spit on. At the same time, we're supposedly going to the moon. We got the Beatles tearing up the scene with the Rolling Stones and a bunch of other stuff. Of course, the 70s were amazing. So they had figured out the platforms. They figured out what was most influential. I mean, this is utterly brilliant for the time, man. Today, it's standard language to talk about narratives and talk about demographics and influencers and stuff. But back in those days, those were only words spoken behind the scenes in really intense PR organizations, right? But we had what I saw happen in between 1990 and say 1992, as I migrated to the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley area, because the recession was utterly gutting Southern California. I mean, so it was Simi Valley had just tons of computer companies, hardware companies. My girlfriend and I at the time drove through that place, and it was just a carcass of every building. You could see through the building to the back. So we have this television show, which is still going, called The Simpsons. Now, The Simpsons has a whole bunch of stuff about it, right? It looks like a lot of predictive programming, right? A lot of stuff is being communicated to the writers that is about to occur in the world, which is why you see it there first and then you see it in real life. But back in the day, it was to do a role reversal on being intelligent or supposedly being cool. The definition of being cool was being stupid and being a loser, which is Bart Simpson. His sister was the corny academic nerd, and you don't want to be her. So that reprioritizes to kids what is important as an academic goal in life. I want to be cool like Bart. All the paraphernalia at the time inside malls and what have you, it had Bart Simpson. It was all about being a loser and being cool. Now, not too many years after that, Beck starts off his career with the song I'm a Loser. Music. It went from this upbeat, positive thing, really love songs and how to drive your car fast or your boat fast on the lake, to this grunge thing. Oh, woe is me, the white privileged kid who needs a negative story. And it's all about the darkest, most macabre areas of the world. Jeremy's broken. Rape me. Right? Tons and tons and tons of this stuff. And you needed to write lyrics that were all about, having issues. Now, again, I'm not criticizing the music because the melodies and the singing and the song playing was fantastic, but the overall effect on the world had its impact. We all know about the transformation between classic hip-hop and gangster rap. Gangster rap is not just an evolution of music, right? NWA came out with gangster rap in the late 80s, and they were like, don't smoke weed. So they got their message out, but also said, hey, don't do this stuff, guys, because you're going to let the man take you down even further. And what everybody did? They waited for the Chronic to come out, and then all of a sudden, everybody's going down the tubes. But you have the Crips and the Bloods that found themselves pretty much in the late 70s. But again, there were codes of conduct in that time. Sure, there's violence. Sure, there's death, but ain't nothing like what was coming. They're getting fed all these drugs by the alphabet agencies, and there's pressure on them as these different factions fought over regions of the cities. They end up getting pressured to kill other regions. You need to clean out that corner, man. You need to clean out that block, clean out that road, clean out that street. This is Crip territory, right? You need to move my product. If you don't move my product, I'm going to sell it to the other guys for cheaper, and I'm going to cut you off. Oh my God. Rationale for total killing and death, right? Federalized prison systems turn into private-for-profit prison systems, and they're the ones that met with the hip-hop producers and said, you're going to start signing this really violent crap, and you're not going to be able to sign any hip-hop stuff. We won't give you any money for it, but we will finance the living crap out of all this heavy, heavy stuff. In some cases, like Suge Knight, you have agencies pushing these guys into the industry to make sure that this stuff is sort of brutal survival of the fittest organizations that are just... People still have nightmares to this day, having worked for that guy for a month, right? Taking their own kind down for a paycheck. And it's all demographics of music, man. When you make it cool to be depressed, guess what's going to happen, right? You get bands like R.E.M. The guy is going through this massive, like, mental crisis about being sort of this is his words, a closet homosexual, and he's in the closet for 10 years and finally pops out, but the entire time he's in there, he feels like he's stuck in a corner and all this other stuff. It's all super, super depressed poetry. Well, by God, you're good at what you do, right? If you're listening to a bunch of depressing crap, then that's what you're going to be, if that's your type of music. But if you're listening, I used to work out and lift all my weights to like Ice Cube. Oh my God, that guy gets me like Superman, like his beats and his illustration of society from his standpoint, he wasn't actually too intense, but he was definitely got the gun and the violence and stuff, but he was sort of like trying to play it from a fair perspective of leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. All right, I have more respect for that, but Jesus, that music was insane, right? Movies go from, hey, we always talk about 80s movies, right? A really funny thing happened about 3 or 4 years ago at the Lounge, probably about 3 years ago. We used to show these classic 80s movies, and there was this residual group of kids that used to smoke the hookah before they screwed with the smoking age for hookah and raised it from 18 to 21, and then that blew up the industry. But they used to come and sit down, and there was this nurse guy who was definitely about 27 years old, but he sat down and we watched, I think, Trading Places. And he's kind of like, you guys going to play this old movie? This kid was obviously not born when the movie was made. But he gets to the end of the movie and the credits roll. And I remember what he said, because he's a very intelligent guy. And he goes, why don't they make movies like this anymore? He's just staring right at the TV. He's like, why don't they make movies like this anymore? He goes, that's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my whole life. And it just flowed, and it was positive, and it was goofy, and it was funny. Why don't they make movies like this anymore? And it doesn't matter what anyone else said after he said that, because he made the biggest point. He felt for one moment what it was like to be in that era. I guarantee it, before he uttered those words, he felt the beauty of what was. But it was trended out of society, right? We're going to get back to California, trust me. But I got to see this from California. And so I go to the Bay Area. And I took a little bit of college up there. And so I'm right in the middle. I'm of college age. I go up there and I've already got my career going, so it's no big deal. I'm just doing fun stuff. And it was my drama class where we got to go outside and chill with each other. And then we wait for class sometimes, what have you, and get to talk to the kids. And at the time, the music just went super dark and everyone realized it. Everyone was about the same age and we're all kind of going, and then movements started, right? It was like all of a sudden, the race issue became a big deal. It's where we got Kwanzaa and we got sort of this Spike Lee School Days thing where he's writing a movie that's like Lawrence Fishburne's playing the Kwanzaa side and the other gentleman, I forget his name, is the most brilliant actor from Breaking Bad. He plays just a brother from Detroit side, I'm just an American. And he plays both sides so you can see. And I think the movie was really expressing the lunacy of this obsession with reaching backwards. If you already live in America and you're from America and you've had 400 years of generations, Spike's, I think, influence was, it's good to find out where you come from, but understand this is where you are now. And so just, you help build this country. Don't disown your ancestors' suffering and then say, this isn't my country. It's back in Africa somewhere. No, this is yours, man. You're a mix of everything, just like I'm a mix of everything. It's like, own it, man. You earned it, man. If you're gonna go all the way to the end of the prize and then walk away from it and have fun in Africa when they call you white because you're not black enough, right? He illustrated this stuff, Now, right after we cross the 90s, we also get Desert Storm. Well, that makes us see a few things that we hadn't seen. The Highway of Death. We'd never seen a modern A-10 Warthog slaughter of hundreds of soldiers coming out of Kuwait, going back to Baghdad. I mean, I think that there was a call. This is just a hunch, but I think there was a call from the intelligence agency going, hey, Saddam, okay, I knew you got permission to invade Kuwait from the State Department, and then we told you to leave, and you said no. And so we need something big to show the American people that we won. We're going to crawl across your south border and declare victory, but we need to show them that we got you. And he sold them out. He sold out everyone who was on that highway. Okay, there's a big group of guys coming in a big iron column. They're going to be there. You're going to leave at 11 o'clock in the morning. Just tear them up, and then that's where you have the Highway of Death. Then he lit all the oil holes on fire. And we see that. It takes 2 or 3 years to get them all blown out with jet engines. You move up to 1993. What do we get? We get a first World Trade Center bombing. You got to understand the FBI built the bomb. They admitted it in the New York Times that they accidentally made a real bomb and should have made a fake one. And they gave it to this dude who then delivers it to the terrorists. The terrorist eventually, the in-between guy said, they wanted me to park this next to the central column and I thought it would take down the building. So I parked it on the edge of the building. And I can't imagine them wanting to bring the whole building down. My God, that would be a timber fall. I don't think it would have fallen because the central columns are insane, but it would have done incredible damage. But thank God he had a conscience and put it on the edge of the building. Okay, so you got to see that. Big explosion on the U.S. soil due to what they told you was a terrorist organization, which they participated, but it was built by our own FBI. New York Times. I think it was on page 7 or something. It was like some late retraction or late correction to the story that no one read, right? Fast forward 2 more years. 1995, you get the Oklahoma City bombing. More terrorism. Crazy. Local, homegrown kid, supposedly. Right? But the bomb squad, they knew and they went down and suited up down the street. Okay. What's this have to do with California? We are absorbing like a sponge all of this negativity, and all of this is just churning out the influence from this state to whoever will listen. Now, by the 80s, okay, there used to be this thing, you go to New York to become an actor just as much as you would go to LA to become an actor. Bruce Willis followed that lead. He tried to be a bartender in New York and act during the day, and he found out that nothing's being filmed in New York anymore. Comes back to Los Angeles, kaboom, kaboom, and he's a famous guy. That's how powerful California was during the 80s, right? So they created a recession as soon as Bush Jr. gets in office, right? And he's obviously the neocon, taking things down like he's supposed to, draining all the funds from everyone to make sure no one can get ahead. People here in California were suffering horrible real estate problems. I mean, it was bad. I had a girlfriend who, her and her husband had bought a house, put all their money into it and couldn't move it. And it was bad. Then they got divorced. What the hell do you do? Then this little miracle happens. And I think they had to have known this was going to do what it did, but it put us on a 10-year hiatus from having another recession, which was a big deal, and I think unexpected. The internet got a little protocol called HTTP. Now, the internet had been around since the late 50s, but it turned into what we know now as the TCP/IP backbone in '69. As the government pushed it on the backs of all the universities so they could pay the bill and the government would just tap into it instead of paying for the whole thing. It spreads globally, but it's very text-based. And then all of a sudden in the early 90s, late 80s, this guy from CERN creates this protocol which allows us to have a markup language page, which you're very familiar with today, aren't you? But it took a while. It took a while for things to proliferate. But the Bay Area is now all of a sudden got a huge syringe stuck right into the ground from the sky. And it's called internet, boom. Now you can't do enough technology to catch up. Everyone's trying to figure out how to learn the internet. And the funny thing was, as much as it was around, and Amazon had a site up, I think, in 93, the wild thing was the only people that were capable of programming it were people that were already hardcore Unix coders. They were somehow able to go to like groups to find out how to program this stuff, because the first book that was ever published on the internet, and this is literally like Bibles of the Silicon Valley region of the 90s, was O'Reilly Publishing came out with a book called CGI, and it was what was it called? Something Gateway Interface. What was the C for? Whatever it was. It's why you always have a CGI desk bin when you install a new website anywhere in the world. But it was a book that talked about a book they were going to make that was going to actually teach you something in Perl. And so then it took another year for about 97 to get any books out. And then all of a sudden they were just coming down like droves, man. You could go buy a new book every month, then 2, and then 4 every month. And of course yours truly was just scooping this stuff up. But I had dudes on the side that were teaching me how to do this stuff. So now you have a bunch of kids in their 20s, as well as older, of course. But a bunch of us are like really, really young, mid-20s, making incredible money, insane amount of money. We're skilled. We know what the hell we're doing. So we get this pop. That was in the Silicon Valley area. In Los Angeles, at the same exact time, you have mega gang violence. Gang violence, blows up in the early 90s, because what ended up taking place in Los Angeles was you've got New York really with Studio 54 really super popularizing cocaine, as I've said several times before, but no one can afford that pure stuff. Of course, in Los Angeles, Malibu, all up and down in Silicon Valley, people are doing coke like crazy. All the rock stars got the first kilo given to them for free, and they gotta buy it because, man, they can stay up all fucking night and write an album, just the grind of the entertainment industry was really compatible with taking cocaine. The problem is it blows out your heart and a bunch of other stuff, right? And I want to say, this is something that's never said, but ladies, when you pound cocaine, you can get a lot of lady problems. And that's all I'm going to say, but make sure, I don't think it's very popular nowadays, but I've got friends who are very forthcoming about that information, and they're like, yeah, I did a bunch of cocaine. This did a bunch of bad things to me. So be very careful if that ever became popular again. That's another reason not to do it anymore. Okay, or to ever start, right? So how do you get anything that can be sold in the ghetto? You got to mix cocaine down into something called crack cocaine, which you can get a little tiny rock for $5, right? Now they got something they can sell to everybody. Weed's weed, whatever. But they want something a little more powerful. Now, of course, on television, especially in the 90s, crack cocaine gets pushed out, not only through the news arteries, but it gets pushed out in television and film, such that white kids are like, oh man, that's a ghetto thing, man. I can't be caught with that. It's below my class structure, So they needed something that the white kids wanted to take. Well, they're all into being depressed. So why don't we bring out some nice Keith Richards heroin? Now, with every single drug, they always find some willing, able-bodied influencer within a particular industry. Most of them we don't have any names for. They're executives, they're whatever. But they always grab a rock star. Like Nikki Sixx's entire thing was, you're supposed to push cocaine into everybody. You're supposed to push heroin into everybody. And it's almost like an affiliate program. If you can prove you get someone hooked, we'll give you the next batch for free, you know? So he's responsible for a few deaths in the music industry. And he tried to get a bunch of hot Hollywood chicks into it, and they refused. Very famous person. I think he was even married to her. He got her to do a huge fucking line of cocaine in a kitchen in front of a bunch of people. And she did it the first time, and she passed out. She literally collapsed right on the fucking floor, and they thought she died. Fucks given, 0 by that guy. And one of my buddies was standing in the room, okay? That's where that story comes from. So, it gets all transitioned. The poppy seed farms in the Middle East start just churning that shit out, and here it comes right into California. Now, I have to say, when I was in the Bay Area, I cannot say I saw any of the coders really doing any weed. There's a few brainiacs that might smoke a little bit of weed. Now, towards the end of the 90s, turn of the century, weed was like in everybody's mix of life, right? Some people could function on it, some people couldn't, you know, whatever. But yeah, so we got gang violence springing all over LA because the legacy of these gangs had been built up to the point where you join the Crips or the Bloods in 1990, man, you got 10 years of lineage or plus, or a few more years back into the 70s. And so it's got this feel because they used drugs to break up all these regions. These kids are by themselves. Their parents are divorced like everyone else's parents in all the other districts of the country. And, you know, they've screwed up the schools. There's all this prejudice. If you don't speak a certain way, you can't get certain jobs. Plus, there's just no money. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion. In a way, they took away these kids' will to live. And so when you back a kid, I mean, the most dangerous thing you can do to anybody is take away everything that they live for. And if they're not willing to take themselves out at the end of that game, then they're willing to hurt anybody because it's like me against the world, you know, let it burn. So yeah, gang violence is getting bad. Like it's getting bad. It starts to, by 93, 94, it was so bad that we've got, you know, these hip hop gangsters classic hip hop guys like Ice-T that were transitioning from the more hip hop positive to the hip hop negative. And he was always trying to spin it, right? He made a song called Pusher, and it's about him pushing albums to you instead of drugs. He talks about power, and he really teaches kids like, man, women got power, you know, money's got power, and you got to be careful what you adopt because it's vicious, right? But he had the Syndicate where she was trying to bring all these gangs together. They made that famous song, We're All in the Same Gang, which Shock G and Humpty Hump's break is the best in the world, dude. It's like one of the most amazing transitions if you haven't heard it before. It's very difficult to find that on YouTube. But then we had a transition. The transition was freeway shootings. And the big, there's all these weird rumors. I'm sure everything's been done once for real. But one of the big rumors was as these gangs became much more violent, and they needed to be violent to clear out the streets, to clear out the corners, you couldn't just have a kid in your gang. You had to have a killer in your gang, and you had to know that they were willing to do it. So one of the big ones in Los Angeles was someone would drive down the street with the car lights off. And the game was that if you flicked your brights at them to have them turn their car lights on, they'd shoot you. A little game they used to play. Don't know how true that is, but I'm sure everything's been done once, right? But the freeway shootings got real. People were just driving on the 405 at night, picking a car that's trying to go home, and they just AK-47 the car. There wasn't a lot of them, but you didn't need a lot of them to freak out the whole state. I used to drive to work, and this one dude wore a motorcycle helmet with bulletproof on it, you know, during the day in the morning, right? I was just doing a joke, but that's how it hit everybody going to work, you know. Then you had your drive-bys. The drive-bys were just indiscriminate shooting of people in neighborhoods to say, we mean business, We don't care if your daughters, your little tiny, 2-year-old sons get killed. We're just sending a message, which means that whole thing, the pressure on those kids in those ghettos got to an absolute ultimate point. How much more ultimate could you go than a drive-by shooting? It's less discriminate than a home invasion. Because at least a home invasion, you're picking a house, you're picking the people in the house. This was just, they're outside, kill them. Parks and all, and there's like one guy, maybe he's the target, right? But 20 people get sprayed with bullets, right? And so it started to be, no one ever goes into those regions anymore. I mean, it's just like you don't go into South Central. Cops stopped going into South Central unless they were armed to the teeth with vans and SWAT teams to bust up some crack house, which is going to already know you're coming, and they're going to flush everything. And even if you shut down one, 10 other ones open. Plus, everybody's on the take. The cops loved it because they could go in and scoop up all the cash and split it later after the bust. Get a little bit of retirement money, right? But I wanted to give you an example of how, before I went north, how California was. I went to this acting agency just because, I don't know, I mean, there's no internet, so I mean, I don't know how the hell, it was a Gold Coast acting or something out of Oxnard, California. So I go in there, and they took a few photos of me, but they said, you really need to go get your headshot done because we got to have something to send out to somebody. They gave me a few lines to speak. I do this camera audition. And then I'm sitting in a chair at this big-ass office. And, of course, they're feeding me bullshit or whatever. But a dude leans into the room, and he says, hey, man, those people we lost so-and-so and so-and-so from this shoot. And the guy across the table just looks at me and goes, you want to be in a movie? And I said, well, sure. When is it? Where is it? He goes, tonight in L.A., South Central. So, okay, sure enough, I drove down there, parked my car in a guarded parking lot. And this is not quite the intense level yet, but it wasn't, they were circling in their lowriders and stuff, making sure we were all staying in our little pocket, right? But I spent like 12 hours there, got in this scene that got cut from the film. It was funny. So that's just how magical it was before all this crazy shit went down. You could just literally get discovered. Because I'm sitting there hanging out with, major actors, and they could have just said, who are you, kid? You look kind of cool. I got this other gig. Maybe you should. And I was kind of shy at the time. So the gang thing gets up to the point in Los Angeles, okay? Because it's starting to spread, right? Los Angeles does it first, and then it spreads and goes to other cities. You go to Austin, Texas today, and everyone's trying to be LA 96. It's unbelievable. And you get into an Uber and you're like, it doesn't matter what race is in the car. They're trying to be as gangster as can be, man, with their word. And it's all ancient shit, man. It's 25-year-old fucking words and priorities in life. And it's really weird. It was like a fucking time machine. I went to Austin for a month and a half in 2018, and I just got in the car every day just cringing. Plus, they're telling me, like, I need escorts to stay in the parking lot. I mean, it's like, and I'm not staying in a shithole. Just unbelievable. Anyway, so about 97, I've talked to cops who worked the beat down there. About 97, it starts to calm down just a little bit. Now, what's interesting is Huntington Beach, where I am, they said that around 97, it started heating up here. I missed all that. But they said that, there's been like gang white on white, fucking Riverside against Orange County bullshit on Main Street. Never a racial thing here, man. Even BLM showing up was pretty funny. It's like the 5 black guys looking at our guys and our other black guys who live here, and it's just like, what are you doing here, dude? Like, you're not in an enemy state, just so you know, man. It just always is kind of yelling them bullhorn. It was over. It's pretty easy. So it becomes popular, right? And you start seeing, once the internet starts getting to the point where it can actually share information, you're starting to see the Midwest start to do it, right? Because again, it's an influencing state. California is telling you what you should do. So go over into the 21st century. Internet's still booming. We've only got about a year left, a year and a half left of the 21st century before all hell's going to fucking break loose, right? And we have the other giant Pearl Harbor in that September day. Okay. California is not involved, but California is looking at New York going, oh my God, our brother state of entertainment, of the Mecca of the United States. I mean, let's just face it, it's New York and Los Angeles. Those are the two biggest influencing cities, as much as San Francisco would love to be that. So when it happens in California, I'm in the Bay Area at the time. We're all stunned, of course, just like everybody in the whole world. I don't think anything super special happened here that didn't happen everywhere else in the world. Airports get locked down. We get the guy, the fake fucking bomb in the shoes, so we all have to take our shoes off. I mean, everything was fake. So things get locked down. Now, at this time, in 2001 to around 2002, there's this economic recession that starts hitting. But now, how does a recession usually hit a particular region of the world? It depends on, are industries making money? That's the big question. If your industry can't make any money because of a particular change in the way the world works, then that particular region goes down, others can stay up. For instance, Orange County, California usually does well in real estate because it's all prime real estate. Every human being on earth who's been here wants to live here. Even if they never do, if they said, if I had that money, I'd buy that house. Well, there's plenty of people who have that money and they buy that house, right? But here's the thing. You've got probably 80% of the world that's not online. At least. They don't have a website. They have no presence online. And this is where everything's going. And so here we are sitting in Silicon Valley with massive talent in doing this. And as Electronic Arts, where I was working at the time, starts laying off people in these giant chunks, man, the maximum chunk they can lay off, which if I remember right, it was like 900 people at a time, which we had 3,500 new employees for this online division. That flopped because of AOL lying about their customer base. We had to get rid of 3,500 people. And I was in the last of the batch. So I got to see some stuff, right? But when I finally got out, I'm thinking about starting a business. I got plenty of money. I'm trying to get jobs. No one's hiring. All my employees that got pushed out that I could still talk to, they couldn't get hired either. Big giant corporations that formed out of thin air and had $1 billion put in them. They actually built buildings across the street from EA. And again, filled it to the brim with people. You could see through the buildings again. That phenomenon came back into my life. I can't remember what it was. There was a weird search engine that started with an E that came about. And they were right across the street. They just closed their doors, man. That might be understandable because search engines were, fighting it out. But man, it didn't make any sense. Until you realize, they were going to start a war. 2003, they're going to deploy troops. Well, a recession always precedes a war because they want all the ghetto kids that have no future to say, okay, I'm done slinging rocks. There's too many people doing it. They can't make enough money. I can get a GI Bill. I can get out of this fucking mess. And so they join the army or military, whatever, and they go have a better life, right? There might be some silver lining stories to that, I don't know. But meanwhile, we got a lot of unemployed people in California from 2002 pretty much up into about 2005 at least, right? At this point, I moved back down to Southern California, but I moved to Southern proper and I go to Orange County. This place is chill again. Not a big tech place. So I was kind of I guess a big fish in a little pond, I guess. So I could do a lot of tech stuff. I managed to survive. It was kind of rough at first. I ended up starting a game company. So that's taken off. And so I would say between about 2005 and say the end of 2008, oh my God, this place is booming again. Real estate's flying out the door. Now, we just had a recession in 2002 that took us a long time to recover from, relatively speaking, with how fast the world works now. Like the Depression took 10 years at least, right, to get out of it. Really wasn't done until the end of the World War II. But at least during World War II, people started forgetting about the soup lines and everyone could go build a B-2 bomber or whatever. Sorry, B-17 bomber. And so we get to the end of 2008. You have your fake subprime loan scandal. Right after the Bilderberg meeting in 2007, they bankrupt Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to get the thing going. Jim Cramer, who now says the world's fantastic, by the way, he's at the end of 2007, says the world's going to end financially. For whatever reason, it didn't happen. They postpone a year. Then the 3,500 point spread drop in the stock market. California starts drying up again. Can't let a whole state make a ton of money for a long time because then people start amassing money to be independent, to be wealthy, to think for themselves. Poverty always breeds this socialism, right? Plus it breeds socialism because socialism promises we're going to pay all your bills for you. It never does, but they always promise that. It's like they might have debt forgiveness, but then there's no food. I don't know. It's just a bad situation, right? So I've got two offices at the time, and the only reason why I mention this is going to illustrate sort of the decline that I personally experienced. We've got a giant gig we lose because one of my partners blows. He fucked up for $500. He lost a $3.5 million annual gig for $500 because he lied about what he did, right? And then we're supposed to get another one of those gigs, but the crash happens, the funding gets pulled, it's done. North office has to go bye-bye because they don't have enough revenue coming in. So that goes poof. And I always demanded that we pay the full rent 1 year at a time because it wasn't that expensive, $24,000 or whatever. Just pay it and have it over with, right? And so I managed to keep a few clients from the Bay Area, buddies of mine from Electronic Arts. Well, my South office had, one client that was cutting 75 to 50 to 75 grand a month to us for all kinds of wild stuff. Had a few extra clients, on the side. Ended up doing some pretty cool stuff that keeps us afloat. We had one final client by 2015. I gotten phone calls from my buddies up north. We're closed. 49 employees, done because of that recession. Meanwhile, all these regulations about how you start your business are accruing. They're preparing for the next squeeze within this state. In order to start a restaurant, you have all these things you got to do that you don't have to do in other states. I mean, it's the health department up the wazoo. Now, of course, we don't hate the health department, but they just get insane. So everything you want to do in your corporate filing, it's $850 a year minimum to just have an LLC. Whether or not you make any money or not. A bunch of other states, you can just file an LLC and it's just a piece of paper and a computer, for Christ's sake. Yeah, charge me $50 to talk to me for 1 second on the telephone so that I can use a website to put my thing in there, but leave me alone after that. I'm here to make money so that I have employees that pay taxes so you can get a bunch of revenue. That's how this stuff works. So it's to compress the small guy to not be able to create any competitors. And it reward the big guys who have all the tax breaks and the big bank accounts anyway to pay those little stupid bills and get a big giant accounting firm to take care of everything. But then we enter the most interesting decade of California's transformation, which is 2010 to 2020. It's rough. We have all kinds of shit going on. Now, we saw previews to everything that happened in 2010 within reason in previous decades, but now it's all going to happen at the same exact time. The beloved Rosa Corey, who is now passed, which I believe was assisted in passing, 50-year-old woman, Agenda 21, expert of the world, also known as Agenda 2030. She is an attorney by law or by profession. She was in the eminent domain realm of California property valuations so they could figure out how much to pay someone for their eminent domain loss. And she starts sniffing around the paperwork and realizes, oh my God, there's this other organization that's global. And she never mentioned Gorbachev talking about it in the early 90s, but he did on the ABC Live or whatever, where he said it was a depopulation. It was a population control plan, but except it was global. And one of the biggest agendas they've got is to de-zone all the land in the world so that you can't live there anymore and they make it too expensive to build, reclaiming the land so that it can't be lived on anymore. The goal in the United States of America is to reclaim about 97% of all the land that is currently occupied by humans, leaving 3% to be occupied by a tiny reservoir of American citizens. If you look at their maps, it can be maybe as high as a few million spread over the entire country. But it could be as also small as 500,000 across the entire country. It's bad and it's small. Deagle.com says we'll be down to 60 million by 70 million by 2025. Okay, so go get your drink, right? Forest fires. Fires. Well, we just saw in 2018 a gigantic strategic fire that burned out strategically homes. Homes that are in the middle of forests, wasted down to white ash. The shrubbery around the house is still green and fine. But somehow everything that was metal, steel, aluminum, whatever, is all melted down. Glass got melted, right? Chimneys got melted down. What's a chimney for, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, yeah, right. You light fires inside chimneys because they contain fire. And these bricks were just melted to the ground. They're getting rid of these homes. As my buddy who lives up in Malibu said, he goes, you got famous celebrities that had their houses burned down. And they're like, I got money. I'll just build a new home. And then they realize that as they have to re-engineer where their house was, in one particular case, for some reason, septic tanks got damaged through this fire. That's how bad it was. either the piping or whatever, and it's all old stuff, so they can't just retrofit. But in order to dig up the hole and service or replace their septic tank, it's $150,000 to apply to get that tank replaced. It's not the tank, it's not the cost of the unit, it's the right to dig in your own property that you own. And so, out of a bunch of homes that went down, they're never ever going to be built again. They're reclaiming the land. They won't let people who own thousands of acres of land build a shed to house like a mower or a tractor or something. That was one of Rosa Corey's biggest examples. She lived in Sonoma County. She said that out of, I believe, about, I want to get the numbers right. So I think it's around 1,200 miles of highway up in Sonoma County, which is a very wine district area. They dezoned 1,000 miles of it, meaning the state's not going to pay for its upkeep. That means the roads are going to atomize and turn into dirt roads and then get overtaken by just nature. And you won't be able to get to your house. You won't be able to get to a business. And who the hell is going to take a clean car and travel on a dirt road if there's any type of big corporation alternative right down the street where you can keep that car clean? It's a process. And California is sucking the old titty on that one, okay? We get these liberal governors. Jerry Brown, weird-ass motherfucker, man. Lives with his daddy. You know, his dad's gone now, but he was just a weird guy, and he's just compromised. He's compromised. Will do anything for money kind of guy. He loses out eventually. This guy named Gray Davis. And Gray Davis was sort of like a moderate, I think you could say. No one really paid attention to him, wasn't hurting anything. But I was in the Bay Area about 1999, and we started having these rolling blackouts because we have our power supply constricted intentionally. A bunch of power companies put themselves in maintenance mode. For those of you who forgot, we got the audio recordings of them talking to each other in a conference call, just laughing on the telephone about how they're going to go into maintenance mode and cause, rolling brownouts. I would sit inside the building that I was in and look over a populated area, and I'd see the lights go off during the day. Traffic lights would go into like blinking red zones and stuff. So anyway, so Gray Davis is like, I'm going to buy hydroelectric power, which is illegal in America after 1973. You can't build any new hydroelectric plants in America after 1973, as per my buddy who's an engineer for 40 plus years. And he says, I'm going to buy clean energy from Canada. But President Bush got involved and said, nope, you can't do that. I'm involved because it's a foreign purchase, and you have to buy Enron energy from Texas at something like 40 times the price. Well, it's a good thing they were roommates, right? Bush Jr. and this guy on Enron. I heard they're college roommates, if that's any help. Well, then Gray Davis gets blamed for this thing, and we get Arnold fucking Schwarzenegger as a governor, man. The guy's wearing his relative's neo-Nazi shit on the front cover of Forbes magazine with Warren Buffett sitting, standing right behind him. Big ass belt buckles of the skull and crossbones, big ass ring, And so, loyalty, give me a break, right? He's pretending to be a Republican, says, brings the fucking broom to his campaign speech. We're going to sweep and clean out the swamp. I mean, give me a break. This dude would do anything they told him. But then we get Jerry Brown again. The fires happen. Then that thing's a total nightmare. They killed the fucking shit out of people doing this thing. And they know they did. I think you could almost see it on their face, right? And 45 comes out and visits. And then we get Newsom. Newsom, who's a married-in, nephew of Nancy Pelosi. It's through a marriage or something, but the guy's like an Ivy Leaguer to the maximum. We haven't seen the guy physically since he got his booster. Apparently he didn't get a placebo. We haven't seen him. But now, since this latest 2 years, which is where the huge focus was on the video I saw today, Los Angeles is done. San Francisco is done. The Skid Row, which is what we call the area of Los Angeles where we typically had sanctuary cities, which is really not about illegal immigrants. They always find a home and work hard. But all of our homeless live there, right? Go see the Soft White Underbelly channel on YouTube if you want to see what that is comprised of. There's very tactful interviews with people down there in this special studio, in Culver City. It's grown. It's all over the place. Where a homeless person used to start setting up a tent, and the cops would come up and say, hey, you can't set up there. This is a public area. They don't do anything anymore. So it's all over the place. And it's tents combined with tents combined with tents. So they're huge, like tents. And they're, from what I understand, there's a bunch of propane tanks going on 24/7 because they're all cooking and trying to stay warm in this horrible weather. Thank God, right? And so what's happened is you see that the children are running the country in a lot of areas, definitely in California, but the children are marionettes on the end of that I pet goat Satan hand, right? With the the S ring and the blood going down the fingers, running down the wire. These kids are being manipulated into destroying their world. But what happened prior to that in the first 2 decades that preceded this last decade for the crowning achievement of 2020? You're a privileged kid who wants to have a negative story. Just like my buddy way back in the mid-90s. And he was just being honest, man. My friend was just letting his emotions come out. So I really thank him for being honest. I don't think it was a bad thing that he said that. He let me know what was going on in his mind, you know. But now think about this. Think about this in the course of history. I'm going to wager that out of all the history that is repeated, this particular thing may not have ever repeated before, meaning it's never happened before, which is that societies toil and work hard to dig their societies out of the shitholes that they end up in, right? They're in a hostile area of the world. It's cold. It's got lots of predators. And so they fight to build streets and roads and walls and, you know, villages so that people can live in peace. They invent religions to create sort of moral barriers so you don't kill just whoever you want to sleep with their wife. You don't just run around bashing everybody on the head. We create the sanctity of marriage because we want to have dedication, because raising kids is much better when you have a group, a mommy and daddy who stays together to kind of guide the child through a vision of how to be in this world, right? So we fight and we fight. And when, Europe decides that tyranny isn't their thing and they defect over to the United States, we fight a revolutionary war. And now we're heading west. We're conquering the United States. And unfortunately, on the back of the Native Americans who, we should have integrated with them, for God's sakes, but I don't know. I would love to have a conversation with a pilgrim and see what the hell their problem was. But of course, the Native Americans are like, this is our land. You can't just have it. You can't, maybe they just don't want you to integrate, right? But even if we're going to be forceful, we should integrate. Instead, they slaughtered. But we're back to log cabins. We're back to, almost no amenities at all, while Europe is paved in stone. So we reset back to the primitive time so we could build something new. And we worked hard, and we did finally build our superhighways and our airports and what have you, our sewage systems. And now there's a group of kids that won't be happy until they destroy it all. And of course, this is nothing new to you guys, but we all know that the constitution and capability of these children is extremely low. What they're capable of actually pulling off, the ones that have the problems, not the new kids that got their shit together. There's a lot of kids that have their shit together, trust me. We just don't know if they're 50%. We just don't know. I would guess way below 50%. But it's not new for less than 50% of the people to hold up the entire society. And I don't mean financially, I just mean operationally speaking, right? So 500,000 people a year move out of the state of California now. And only 400,000 are moving in. So we're losing a net of 100,000 people a month. So how does California survive? California has a gigantic multi-billion-dollar budget to keep this place going. Not because it has to, but because you have a bunch of greedy bastards at the top laundering money. Example, the group that was put together in San Francisco by Pelosi to clean all the homeless off the street and give them a place to live and rehabilitate them. I believe the number was upwards of $6 billion was allocated from the California state budget, probably subsidized by government funds, I don't know. But all that money was laundered into politicians, and the liberals picked a black guy to go down for the whole crime, and he's in jail for the rest of his life, as I understand it. But obviously he wasn't the only guy. But we all know what they do. They create patsies way ahead of time. We're going to pin it all on that dude right there. Oh, the black guy, well, that's great, because that's what we do as Democrats. We've always enslaved those people, right? So this state blows money left and right, laundering it all over the fucking place. So how does it pay its bills? Well, it pays its bills the way America paid its bills before the false ratification of the 16th Amendment, which pushed it on the backs of the citizens with this fake, illegal mandatory taxation for the citizens of the United States. And of course, a bunch of patriotic people misinterpret that and go, well, if you don't pay your taxes, then you're an asshole. You don't like your country. No, 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 no. We had corporations that paid their taxes instead of get a bunch of tax breaks. When you tax the corporations, you make billions of dollars, and no one has to pay taxes underneath. Your wages are your property. That's what the Constitution says. Okay. So now California has so overregulated this place and so taxed the living shit out of this place and made it almost impossible for corporations to just pay their employees enough money to survive the horrible living conditions where the homes are way fucking overpriced, the food's way overpriced, everything's overpriced, right? Then now they're leaving California in droves. This dude in this video scrolled a list up that must have been 50 companies that were leaving, that have already left, California. And you're talking about name brand, big ass companies pulling everything out of California. So eventually California is going to go bankrupt. It's going to go bankrupt. And those that laundered all the money are going to be just fine for the rest of their lives. But of course, what's the irony of the whole thing is that the kids that are causing this horrible thing are going to be the first people to suffer. They actually already are, and they don't know it. They can't possibly buy a house. They can't. They can barely rent a place that looks, what can I say, appropriate for their age and their capabilities, 1-bedroom apartments and stuff. I will tell you that in California, for at least Southern California, Los Angeles, and all of the Bay Area down to San Jose, which is about 60 miles. Those are two. San Jose is huge. I mean, it's a big, sprawling city. Like, the downtown's not that big, but Los Angeles downtown isn't that big, but Los Angeles is everywhere. It's all over the place, right? But if you were to make $150,000 a year, if you were totally single, you'd live fine. Second, you have a family and you want your wife to stay home to raise the kids, provided she wants to do that as well. Now you got a big problem on your hands. You don't make enough money to pull that off. If she has to go to work, then you have a daycare problem from fucking hell. Daycare is a house payment every month. Say your house payment's $4,000, $5,000. You will damn near pay that every month for your one child, let alone 2 or 3. It's all designed by the people that want to depopulate the living shit out of us, right? Now, a lot of Californians might be kind of secretly going, well, it's good that people are leaving and not coming back, but they're not realizing that the state is going on life support. I think within half a decade, California is going to have a ventilator hooked up to it, right? And the thing is if you want to know whether or not your voting process is being processed correctly or not, I will tell you that the huge secret about California is it's red as hell. It's red from top to bottom. Now, when you do find the non-red people, oh, they're acidically fucking far left, for goddamn sure. They are the most leftist motherfuckers you've ever met in your entire life. But if you were to count them, and then count all the people that want a normal goddamn life, it's a microscopic percentage in this state. But since they've sold you through the press, the mass media, and every other movie and television show that you ever watched that this is a totally liberal place, you buy the voting results. When you look at the leadership being entirely responsible for all the policies that destroy your region, you start to understand what's real and what's not. This one woman mentioned a great example. She was, I believe, a Latin woman living here with me in Orange County somewhere. And they were just asking her, why she thought she wanted to leave the state. And she said, well, I own my house, that's the reason why leaving is a little difficult. But she said, look, we have a massive homeless problem way before the coup hit, right? And she said, before 2020, she goes, they mandated a fucking, paper straw thing. And they even tried to, they passed this law in Los Angeles that if a waiter or waitress brought you a plastic straw, that it was $1,000 fine for them for giving you a plastic straw. I will say in Orange County, we had a few paper straws for a while. They fucking suck. They turn into like mush halfway through your drink if you're sipping fast. Can't get any hot beverages with one of those, right? And now it's gone. It's completely gone. You might find a place that does it, but it's all gone. All the restaurants that loaded up with this crap, they pulled out of it. Well, no one had an announcement that this fine disappeared. No one had an announcement that that wasn't a priority. But this woman's point was brilliant. She said, look, you're focusing on fucking straws. And we got Los Angeles covered before 2020. The Skid Row is about 6 miles long, which that's huge, man. 6 miles. Okay, let's just think about, and it's all the connecting streets down there, Little Tokyo, or Little Tokyo, I think it is. That area. That means if you lined up all the streets in a big line of Skid Row and traveled 60 miles an hour, it'd take you 6 minutes to get to the end of that line. And now it's 10, 20, 30 miles. I mean, who knows? It's every street down there. I haven't been to Los Angeles proper since March of 2020. I have friends that I used to eat lunch with 4 times a year, at least, if we were going slow on it. I haven't seen one of my mentors for, it'll be 2 years next February. 2 years, man. February, January, somewhere in there, right? And they have obviously socially infected people that are mentally sort of not sound to use this as a mechanism to be a part of something, right? And so they have us tearing ourselves apart within this state. It's calmed down a little bit, but they're trying to ramp it back up again. The winter of death. Okay. Yeah. For those of us who are healthy. Isn't that funny? And the thing is he's put this big prediction out there, and he already has one of the lowest approval ratings of any president in U.S. history. And the thing is if a bunch of people don't die, especially that don't have the drink, then what's it going to look like in spring when we don't have a gigantic death? He's going to look like an asshole even more. So California is a really regionally, it's a real regional experience. Let's put it that way. So, if you're in Orange County, you're pretty much in Florida. You go north, at least 2 counties, and you're back in Los Angeles County. You are in the far, far left fucking idiocracy world and I don't even know, like some Walking Dead thing mixed together. You go back out into Ventura County, it's a little bit better. You go into, of course, the woods, and it's kind of hit and miss. You go into San Francisco, San Jose, it's all coofed out again. You have people in this state that are registered Democrats who are now going, oh my God, what the hell is going on? This is all insane. And they're flipping further red, like, maybe I'm not blue then. If blue means AOC, then I guess I'm red. And it's a sad thing that people are all sort of polarized like that, because where you need to be is, I guess, purple in the middle is where you really need to be. Yeah, sure, there's some liberal things you might, let's relax on that. Let's get really conservative on this, whatever. Humanity's purple, at least it should be, because that's the only place that do no harm really exists, is in this dead center. You're compromising, you're understanding that people are different. Because it goes militant either way when you go to extremes. Now, just a little bit into each direction, you can totally survive in a conversation with somebody. But that's not the game. But just remember, as a part of the undertow of this episode, the whole thing is about the fact that they are selling you Demise now. The new norms, right? They're selling you the new less is more sort of lifestyle. And part of it, I saw another video, we didn't watch it, but it was a guy saying that the greediness and consumerism of America is its demise, and I have to completely agree with that too. When you feel like you need a bunch of shit that you don't need. Some people buy campers and they go camping. Some people buy ski equipment and they go skiing. Some people do that. For those people, they're using their equipment and it's a big part of their life. But a lot of people just buy because they're bored. And they're kind of like turning into a mini hoarder to sort of solve their problems in life. We built this whole country on this, the holidays, right? Being in America from pretty much Halloween to the end of the year is miserable if you are not a consumer. It's miserable, man. You're supposed to do all this shit. And if you don't, well, you're a weirdo. It's like, And then, as soon as it turns over, January 1st, what's funny is most of the New Year's resolutions are based on people realizing their infatuation with consumerism. They ate too much in the previous months, so now they're all on a diet. What a fucking joke, right? The thing about California that is, I think, overtaken the rest of the United States of America, unfortunately, is that it's still this gigantic influencer. I'm hoping that around the world it's starting to lose its shine. We just want to live. That's all, man. It is a very beautiful place, in my opinion. If you like forest, you go north. If you like beaches, you go south. And there's sort of hybrids in between. But it's a target. It's a huge, huge target. Orange County is a target because it's conservative. We had an air show that was bringing everybody together. Huge ton of cash going into our Main Street area, all the businesses, because people are coming in from everywhere to watch this amazing air show. Well, somebody spilled oil on purpose to make sure that the air show was canceled the next day. They cleaned it up lickety-split. And when you start talking to the locals, they're like, you know what? 30, 40 years ago, you'd walk down the beach and your feet were covered with crude oil. And nobody had any problems with it. You'd surf in crude oil. Why? Because it was popping out of the ground. That's why. And there's nothing they could do about it. So you just knew you got covered in that shit. You know, it's up to you, man. Hopefully you understand the physical ramifications if you ingest it or get it in your eyes. But all those beach movies you ever saw in Southern California where they're out there surfing, my friends who are massive surfers or were, they're like, that was just the way it is. And to cancel the air show because there's a little bit of oil, they didn't even hit the coast until the next day after the air show would have gone on Sunday. So they're not playing games, man. Agenda 21 is in full swing. Honda P, okay? And it's in full swing in your backyard, in your front yard, in your country. The whole game is to de-zone the world from living in it, to give you reasons to get medical procedures to hurt yourself. It is the single most important agenda that you can research and repeat to other people. Don't worry about the past, man. We can't bring anything back from 9/11. We can't re-land on the moon in 69. I mean, those are fun things to talk about, and we will talk about them very soon here. But I'm telling you, Agenda 2030 is why Rosa Koire's dead. She knew way too much. She's way too accessible. She's way too brilliant. She was, in many cases, she was a libertarian by definition, but she had all the demographics that made people back off, right? She was a lesbian. That was a big deal. So she was kind of a liberal. She lived in a really kind of crunchy area of California. So you couldn't accuse her of all these right-wing conspiracy things. So they couldn't stop her. Her last name's Koire, Koire, Rosa, Rosa. Go look her up. Watch every single video that she has out there. Download them so you have them, because I'm sure they're going to get scraped somehow. But she worked tirelessly. My first video I ever saw was 2012. So I don't know how far back she goes. But she'll just, any speech she ever gave, just download it and watch it. It's your future if you don't change things. The more you educate, we know we have absolutely stopped them in their tracks. I don't know if Jim Cramer going on Fox, his little financial show in the morning, actually paused the recession for 1 year. But what that guy did was, he's now a creep and he's now totally on the dole. He's a piece of shit nowadays. But anyway, he said the stock market is going to crash 3,000 to 3,500 points. It's going to happen real soon. It's going to happen right, like in this week or in the next, within the month, right? Well, if they did crash it, this guy's going to look like a prophet and they're going to start asking questions. And so I think that guy literally caused them to go an extra year just by one dude saying something publicly. So maybe you have access to something where educating people will start to spread around, because it used to be when you talked about Agenda 21, you talk about it and people go, okay, what's supposed to be happening in? Oh, the world's going to get, and then it'd be like, I'm not seeing that. Now you're seeing it. Okay. The whole 2020 coof thing is gigantic cause and effect. I've been talking about this on my show for 6 years, and I'm getting it from other people, man. I'm not the source. And so now we're seeing every sector of this executing and taking its course. So get educated. Make your own opinions, of course. Don't worry about what I say. And just let me know what you think about this whole thing. I'd like to know from you guys, one, if you live here in California, sort of what your opinion of the whole thing is. But two, I think almost more importantly, how much influence do you think Hollywood or anything Los Angeles or California did affect you, say, 10, 20 years ago, and how much it affects you today? Because if there's a big drop, that's important. People are moving out of the state, so they cannot say they're from California without apologizing. And they have to tell the locals, look, I'm not bringing that crap to you. I'm coming to you because I'm like you. And they said if they don't, they get harassed physically. They said getting the California plate off your car is number one priority if you leave the state. And I'm going to tell you, when I was a kid, if you said you moved to my little hometown of 10,000 people, we had this drug pusher kid, not that attractive, kind of a weaselly kind of guy. I think in the end he was okay, but he came in really trying to push drugs and shit around the town. He was from California. For a few months, he had access to the hottest chicks in the entire town because they were just throwing themselves at him before they really kind of got the goggles off and went, "Ooh, whoa, you're not even handsome. What the hell?" And when he started pushing drugs, they're like, "Okay, I had you wrong, right?" He quickly stopped that, which was good. But that won't work anymore, I don't think. I don't think you walking in saying you're from California is ever going to help you anymore in this decade at least, right? So give me your thoughts. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Just bookmark it in case January 5th we get clipped. Who knows? And that's all I'm going to say. Everything is up there that you need. To all the PayPal and Patreon people, thank you so much. You make the show happen. And if you guys want to get on that, you get sort of personal chats from me. I'm going to start putting more stuff up there. I also think I'm going to start sneaking in some Season 7 intro assets so you can see what's going on and what's taking so long. It'll make sense to you right away. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.